So now that we have one array down pat, what happens when we have either one of two conditions that needs to happen? The first is the easiest of the two conditions, which is known as a parallel array. We can see this in the text on page like 404 and 405, actually through 406. What we're saying is that we have two arrays that, despite the fact that they're different, it just so happens that we always use them together. So here in the text, what we have is an integer array and a double array that are always, for whatever reason, put together. So on page 405, what we would have is an employee number and an employee rate for salary. So this way, I would know as a developer that the employee whose number is stored in array element 0 has the salary that is stored in the salary array element 0. That the employee whose name is stored in the employee array element at 1 has the salary of employee salary array at 1, and so on and so forth. You can kind of see the relationship between the two on page 406. There's that neat little figure 7.13 that says, hey, every time it is that you make a call to employee number 1, they're in element 0, here's the hours, here's the pay rate, and they just kind of conceptually go together. If you flip over, or rather if you click on the shell link I have for you here, I refer to it as paired in the link right under this podcast. What you can see is I have two arrays. One of them is an integer array with the number of the alphabet. The other is a character array, which just has, the letters A, B, C, D, all the way through J. On line number 12, you'll see I have a little note for you there. Remember, since this is a program specified as opposed to an output specific, the values that I read into that character array don't get double quotes, they get single quotes. So what I have for you there is I have already read in those values, so I have provided default values at the time I have created and instantiated my array. What I have is on line number 23, a quick and dirty for loop, where I'm simply going to output the number of the letter and then the letter itself. So you can see because these arrays are paired, when I output through that loop my iteration, so when I make that output for number of alpha, I can use that very same output for letter of alpha, the two different arrays that I have. And boom, they're going to print together. So if you go ahead and run this particular program, what you'll notice is a little bit of formatting shenanigans there, so it looks all pretty. My argument to you would be it doesn't look altogether that pretty. But what you see is letter number 1 gets you A, letter number 2 gets you B, and so on and so forth. My little note to you there at the very bottom of the output is notice how it's set with makes this a lot easier. I have, and I do not begrudge anybody who did it in any of the 5 or 6 challenge problems. People went a long way around the block to make really good-looking, formatted printing outputs for any of the challenge problems. But what I will tell you is one small variance there between sets of data, and we get a little bit of an output discrepancy. So you'll notice that the letter J is not lining up with all of the rest of the letters of the alphabet, and that's because element number 10 has 2 characters, so that pushes off the J by 1 character. This is something that I know I got a lot of feedback on in the questions from everybody was, why isn't my output lining up correctly? Well, it is technically. If we'd have used a set with, this would have been easily accommodated, but for those of you who did really a great job again on all the formatting shenanigans where we would have, dots and dashes and slashes and things to make up the visual arena there. This is the result, like we see there on line number 10 of the output, is that J, one letter too many, or one character over too many, and that's because of that, the 2 characters for 10 instead of the 1 character there. Little changes make a big difference there. The second link I have for you under this podcast is a 2-dimensional array. So if you go ahead and click on that, what you'll notice here is inside of my declaration, so it's line number 10, I actually have numbers inside of 2 of the braces. So these are rows by columns. So what I have for you are essentially 2 sets of nested for loops. So the one on the very top, so lines 13 down through it looks like 25, is the data entry for loop. What this is doing is the outer for loop there, so line number 15 sets up the rows. So rows go left to right. You'll notice that is empty. And then what we have is the next for loop, so that's line number 18. This one sets up the columns. So what we're saying is the first iteration through line number 15 is going to set the row counter to 0, and then line number 18 is going to set the column counter to 0. And you're going to enter in a row and column. So you would enter in 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, and that's it. And then it's going to go back up to line 15. That's going to set the row counter to 1, and then you would come back into line essentially 18, and so on and so forth. So what I will tell you is, as you're going through these, just to really get the hang of things, you are entering in 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, and 0, 4. And that is going to be your first row. Then after that, it is 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, and 1, 4. That's your second row. All the way down through your 5 by 5 array here. Then what we have is line number 27 through 39. We again have this nested for loop. The outer for prints out your rows. The inner for prints out the individual columns. So what you're going to see is an output of the input that you've entered in as you were reading values into your array. The one little ditty here you'll notice is actually at line number 38. What I have is an end line after each row. So that means when I'm finished printing out the columns, it's going to finish that nested portion of the for loop. It's going to print out an end line, so it's going to go to the next line, and then you can continue printing out values in this way. What I'm going to suggest here is this block of code, essentially everything from line 13 down through 39, is really what you're going to use to do 2 things. Read in your values into the array and print out your values from the array. Make sure you step through this and get used to how this works. So copy this code, maybe redo it essentially in either another shell window or in Visual Studio, and just get the hang of how this works. What I can tell you is, once you build a muscle memory around this, is it as convenient as a range-based for? No, but it's more flexible. It works on a much wider variety or versions of C++, and it just turns out to be kind of the standard boilerplate template for how developers, read values into and read values out of a set of arrays. In this case, it's a set of 2-dimensional arrays. But this is how you would do that. What I can tell you again is, if you look under this particular code sample I will put the block of text there. What you're entering in is 0001, 02, 03, 04, and so on and so forth, so that you can build your two-dimensional arrays, and you can get used to, exactly how it is that arrays work. So you're telling me that the very first element in the array here is 00? Yep, that's what I'm telling you. And you just kind of have to get used to, how, especially in a multi-dimensional array, a two-dimensional, a three-dimensional, a four-dimensional array works. Now, here in class, what I can tell you is we're not even using a three-dimensional array. We're simply going to top out with two-dimensional arrays. Could you have more? Yes. Do they get to be mind-blowingly complicated? Yeah, that's the case too. So we're going to stop here with two-dimensional. Remember, a paired array is simply when you have two separate one-dimensional arrays. You can even have more than that, I suppose. But they are always called and they are always used to represent kind of a full and complete data set. So employee numbers and employee names are paired arrays because in one array you have a homogeneous data type integer for an employee number, and in the other array you have a homogeneous data type strings for an employee name. So I'm always going to use them together. Potentially I'm always going to call them together, but they're not really conjoined in any way, shape, or form. Here with a multi-dimensional array, what we have are rows and columns of homogeneous data. So they're all the same data type, all integers, all strings, all characters, etc. And we would get rows and columns that we can fill in with data.